Welcome to Talking Tuesday. I am your host, Fancy Quant, and today we are going to talk about stories I have learned from managers here. So one thing I get asked a lot is, Dimitri, how do you become a great manager, and what are like the rules for this? I think a lot of this is going to be that you learn these over the years from actual real world scenarios, and you're going to see there's two ways to handle this. There's lessons and a manager does something and you're like, wow, I learned a lot, right? That was a great way to handle that. Or there's going to be the second type, which is, wow, that was terrible, and that was definitely not the right way to do it. Today's episode, we're going to talk about the good stories, the good decisions, and the lessons I've learned from these great decisions from managers. And then if you stick around for next week's episode here, of course, on Tuesday, I'll have the follow-up, which is going to be lessons I have learned from managers based on poor decisions they made and the lessons I've learned from all these, bad decisions that they ended up making based on different situations. So without further ado, let's just dive on in here to the first of three stories here. So the first story is probably one of the ones it just is baked into my mind, and I think it has great lessons with it as well. But we were in this meeting in you can imagine like a bank with a boardroom, and my boss is sitting at the table. I believe she's at the head of the table, and me and my other colleagues are all sitting around this table. And we're going through like our weekly checkup on this is this project, this is where it's at, this is what needs to get done. These are things that need to get redone. These are corrections, fixes, questions are being asked. And my manager starts going in on this project and is like, hey, this all needs to get redone, and she's pointing out like there's these issues. And all of a sudden, one of my colleagues who did the work just jumped up and it was like he'd had it, like he was done. And he started going off about how somebody else had got promoted that was younger. Again, not on our team, but on another team. And of course, you see these things across the bank and it looks unfair, which often they are. And then kind of the mantra of this is like they're tired of doing what we like to call the donkey work. And the donkey work is the tedious, worthless tasks that basically we get stuck doing because it's part of the job from time to time. And if you're not familiar in the quant realm, doing Excel work is donkey work. It's basically beneath a quant to do it. It's a waste of time. There's often 10 times better, faster, more efficient methods out there. But business people like to see it done in Excel, which creates a big headache. Anyways, and they'd made them do this over and over, and now they're wanting him to do other stuff over again and more tedious updates. And he had just had it. And he just stood up and was like, I am done, right? Just fire me. Give me my severance or whatnot, let me walk out the door. I'm done. I'm sick of this. It's the same crap. And he's going on this rant about this. And my first, I just remember my first knee-jerk reaction was like, I couldn't believe it was happening. And just let him go, right? Just let him go. Obviously he's had it. He's mad. He's upset. This wasn't like him casually chatting about this. This was like an explosion of emotions. And so my first reaction was, okay, just let him go. Just fire him and be done with it. And to my surprise, my manager's like, no, hold on, trying to cool it off. One of my colleagues that was doing some of the work with this tried to jump in to smooth over. And my manager's like, basically sit down, let me handle this. And explaining it's not a big deal. We're going to go in, we're going to smooth some things over. We just need a few adjustments, you need to really think about this. Don't make any knee-jerk reactions. And they were like, no, I'm done. I am done. And of course you have me in my head oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. Just get rid of him. This is the knee-jerk reaction. And then we all left. And my boss was like, all right, everybody out. Meeting's over. I need to talk to this, colleague of mine, this employee. And then we were all sitting out in our desks, just kind of stunned and shocked. And the colleague that blew up, we have great times together. So, nothing on them. And I completely get it because in my head, sometimes I want to explode and just be I'm just done with all this nonsense, especially on tedious tasks when you're repetitively doing these nonsensical things. Just to give you an example on this, a chart will be done and they go, well, we don't really like the axes. Can you rescale the axes a little bit because I want the line just to fit the chart a little bit more? Or, this line is blue, but I don't like the color of blue. I like this to be a lighter color of blue, but don't change it from blue. It just needs to be a lighter color of blue. And, I don't really like that it's just the line. Can you add the dots? And as a quant, you're looking at this who cares? It's a dumb chart. Is the line on the chart that you're looking at, does it get the message across? And I go, I don't know what the problem is. So I get it. I completely understand it. But my manager handled this extremely well, and that she, I believe, I don't know all the inside details afterwards, but she discussed with him like basically what's being done, why it needs to be done. It's kind of a knee-jerk reaction. And she kind of just smoothed it over, and the employee came out and was like, I'm sorry, I just lost my cool. And so we all moved on from that. And it sounds just like an entertainment story, but the two lessons I really learned from this are, one, don't be quick to make a decision. And as I think about this story in my head, like as things happen to me in my career, and I see managers that are just like quick to shoot from the hip, like, something bad will happen at work, or they don't do their job and they look terrible and then they get caught. Like they're just quick to let people go or fire them, or like they're quick to like yell and scream or quick to do something. And for me, this is something that this scenario for some reason just really took it home for me. Like I'm actually grateful that I had this situation, because for me, it's really thinking about like, okay, this is a situation like my instinct right off the bat is probably what most people's would have been, which is like, okay, you're mad, you're unhappy, you don't like working here, you're tired of the nonsensical things, and so you're going to quit, so just fire them so that they can get unemployment. That's a very ethical thing to do in a situation like that. But that's the wrong decision. Like my instinct was completely wrong. The manager made the right decision. And as I see these things go out through careers, and I watched this manager I had specifically, she was able to like step back and really think these things through, often when it was critical. So sometimes she jumped off the handle a little bit here and there on things, like everybody does. But when it was critical and it mattered, she always took the time to sit and think about like, what are the long-term consequences of this happening? Why is this important? And most importantly of this, she takes the time to sit and talk with you and figure out what's the issue that's really going on here. Now, with this manager as well, I've had incidents where one specific incident where I never resolved a disagreement with her. It just stood open for as long as I worked there, which is fine. But that great lesson is really like taking the time to think these things through, because I would have regretted, letting that employee go. And so, right, thinking like I would have done the wrong thing there. So the lesson there is just take the time to really think things through before making a decision, really go through the details and try to extend that time period, right? Like don't make a decision on the spot like I would have done. Sit and chat with the employee like she did, and then, really have some time to cool down. Everyone can cool down. You can kind of think about it. The second lesson from this is that every employee adds unique value. And I say this as every, but I'm going to say most, but every employee has at least one or two things that's good about them. But this employee specifically, I had other instances, so not this same employee, but another colleague of mine, an employee that we had, and specifically in this example, I guess, is that, thinking through that, like they add different values from what you think. And so when I think about quant finance, right, I talk a lot about being the all-star. You want to be the all-star quant. You want to hit all these career goals. You want to be, vice president, director, associate director, SVP, senior director, managing director, managing partner, whatever. You want to run through these things, and you want to be the all-star, and you want to be like working, tons of hours and crazy things like that. This employee though, in general, in this scenario, I really thought about it after like the event occurred. Like we really need that individual on our team here. And that individual is awesome and easygoing, which makes it really fun to work with him. But at the same time, right, he's not the all-star that's like, he doesn't want to stay 10, 12 hours just for the sake of staying 10 to 12 hours because he just loves the work. And I get that. I completely get that. But looking at everybody and how they contribute to the team, looking at their expertise, looking at their unique individual backgrounds, and in this case, right, letting them go would have been a mistake because they had skills and they were able to really do the work well when it was assigned out. They followed directions extremely well. And so, thinking about that from this lesson as well, the great takeaway is that everybody has some sort of value. When you're going to have a situation like this, or you have an explosion or something, really thinking about too as well, like what is the unique value they have? What do they add to the team? And how do they fit in the team? And perhaps you have someone that just doesn't fit your team and doesn't have your values and doesn't have a unique skill set that really highlights what you guys do or don't need. Maybe they don't add much value at all. And in that scenario, maybe you stop and think about it. And again, maybe the situation isn't that you necessarily fire them up front, but maybe you'd fire them later down the road, or maybe in a day or a week or 2 weeks or something after you've thought about it and kind of worked through it with that individual. So those are the takeaways here of the first story. Now, the second story is going to be on team building and dinners here. So I had this manager, which I thought was kind of a crazy thing, but she would take us out to dinner on her own dime. And we asked her once, like, why don't you just throw it on the company account? They were often like team building exercises, so you could like expense at least some of them, if not all of them. But team building exercises, she would pay for everything out of pocket. And now my boss wasn't like a cheap, I don't know, cheap palate, I guess I would say. Like, I'm a cheap palate. I don't mind eating like fast food and stuff. Like, it's all good. Like, let's go grab, a cheeseburger at McDonald's, or let's go hit, Taco Bell or something cheap. But she would take us out to like really nice dinners. Like, I remember we went to a French dinner once, and I think it was like more than $100 a person. And again, she just did this out of, just the sake of her own heart. I think it was just like she enjoyed being part of the team. She gave a lot of value to it. The other piece of this too is my team did things I feel like that most teams didn't do. And we all liked being there together. Like, the team was a good cohesive team here. And I'll give you an example of this. So corporate wide, we would have, what's it called? Like a giving month, or like I don't know. There's like a month where you spend time and you do activities where you give back to the community and do some sort of charity work. And my team, so that's one example of the charity work. My team would actually go to the like Habitat for Humanity's locations where they sell materials, and then the profits from those materials go back to Habitat for Humanity and all that. Anyways, my team went multiple years in a row. We would just continually go to the same opportunity, the same store. And every year we would have that same, team building charitable thing going on. And we would spend like a half day, it was like 4 hours or something, 5 hours, something like that. We'd go down there and we'd have to like just help the store out. Like, what do you guys need? Like, we're like, I remember we were unloading or loading up these massive bats of insulation and stuff. And of course they're fiberglass. And so you need to have gloves on. And of course I dressed correctly because I'm expecting to do all this. And we're moving furniture and tile and like paint and caulk and stacking things and getting it all ready. And loads are coming in. We're unloading trucks for them. So we did that activity, and that was actually fairly fun. The other activity we also did as a group was so every year there was a Be Fit week for the corporation. And my team specifically would do, like, we got to do stairs together. So every day we're trying to do stairs. And I am the complaining employee, like, yeah, this is so dumb. This is a waste of my time. I'm in a suit and I'm in a shirt and a tie. So I don't have my jacket on or anything, but I'm in like a button-up shirt with a tie on. And we're having to go up and down these stairs. We're on the 15th floor, and we go all the way down and all the way back up, and I'm tired. But my team's doing it just because one of my colleagues wants to do it and is like adamant, we need to do this as a team. And then on the team event, so the one day for the week here, we went and did, I believe, like a step box class together. And so, again, a little bit out of the element. My team, my boss was a woman. There was 4 guys on the team. I believe 3 of us or 4 of us all went. So, and then we show up at this class, and there's just nothing but women at a step box class at a gym. But my boss got us to do this for the activity. And of course, we all kind of felt ridiculous, but we kind of like, joked and had fun, and we all did actually fairly well. And it was a good, fun activity here. So the dinners, the team building, all these things, these are things that not every team did, right? So not every team, my boss didn't live in town, so she would come in and fly in, and she'd take us out to dinner. And I mean, this is like probably once a month, once every couple months, once a quarter. Like, we were going out a fair amount of time on her dime. And then, of course, we did gifts and stuff during the holidays. And, of course, I show up and, she's giving us, like, a gift card to Amazon. And then we're getting, like, some candy and a card and stuff. And, like, it's just really nice gesture. It makes you feel like you're part of something bigger and better. And it makes you feel like her as a person, like, my boss actually really appreciated the work that we did. It wasn't like, oh, here's a financial, I don't know, cheap, tacky gift from the corporation, for the holidays, or here's a bonus, whatever, that everybody else gets. Like, it just made it feel better. And we reciprocated that as well. So during the holidays, we'd all put the card together. We'd sign the card. We'd all pitch money in. We'd get like a gift card for like Amazon or something. And, we would have, of course, our big holiday dinner, which I'm going to actually really miss because I'm not there anymore. But the team would get together. We'd go out, around Christmas time. We'd talk about, the team, the goals, everything. And then it was like, no work talk. And we're just chatting about kids and family and, food and traveling and everything else. But these sort of team building activities, for me at first, I felt like were just like a grind or a burden. Like, I don't really want to take time out of my busy schedule, right? I'm married, didn't have kids at the time, but I'm married. I live like 45 minutes from downtown. I don't know. My wife works downtown. We carpool. So now I got to schedule a second carpool so my wife can go home. Or one time, like my wife waited in her office and then I feel terrible about it. And so they always felt like, oh, it's kind of like this burden on me. But looking back here, the lessons I took away from actually doing these team building exercises, being a part of the team, is the first lesson is going to be small gestures like coffee, dinners, and holiday gifts make you feel just valued, as I mentioned here. It's that really that cherry on the top of like, my manager doesn't have to do any of this, but she does it because she likes the team and she wants us to, to know that we're valued as teammates on the team here. The second lesson that I've learned from this is getting involved in outside activities helps build relationships, which makes work more productive during your day. So I joined the team at first when I started. I was probably one of the last people to join on that team. And I remember thinking like, I don't really know. These people are just different. They're not like my other colleagues. And I really wish I had the other colleagues that I had. And I liked working with them. And, in my head, I'm like just complaining because I don't like change. But as we did these team building activities, I really built stronger relationships with a lot of the colleagues. And even like the ones like I was kind of close with, but not super close with, as we did like the step boxing classes and we did like more dinners and stuff, you start to really learn about things that just aren't work related. Like I start to learn about, their kids and what college they're looking at going to. And then they start asking me, Dimitri, you're the young guy here. You know the most about this and you have a podcast and YouTube channel that talks about education and all that. Where would you go? Why would you go? And so then you start kind of getting like an invested relationship that you're building with your colleagues here. So, and then this plays, benefits down the road here where it's like at work when you're getting frustrated and perhaps maybe when you have a knee-jerk reaction, like the first story, you're more willing to sit and talk and understand them and try to figure out what's going on with them. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe, a family member's sick. Maybe something else is going on in their life. Again, things that aren't work related, but as a good manager, you should try to be willing to understand these sorts of issues. And also as you kind of like build these relationships and bonds with your colleagues and management and employees and all that, it just makes it more productive because you guys kind of know what you're expecting of each other quickly. You can kind of get in and out of projects. It's easier to work together and it makes things far more productive. And I know it sounds like, a Hallmark saying of like, oh, productivity increases because you took the time. These are all things where we actually spent time together. We actually built relationships. This wasn't like how do we make fake relationships within, a week or something of being a manager. So that's the second lesson. So the third lesson from this is while outside activities take up your personal time and can be inconvenient, they do add good value here. So my boss, I wish I had a better relationship with her when I was there. We got along great. Like there's nothing bad about that, but I just wish there was like more of a understanding and connection. She always felt somewhat shielded and kind of cut off. But at one of our holiday parties, we did sit and chat for quite some time about coffees and talked about the ins and the outs and what she's drinking and I'm drinking. And for those of you that don't know, I drink a fair amount of coffee and I read, I'm a nerd. So I read books on the processes of doing the coffee and how they grow it and elevation effects of it and the history of it and how it's washed or non-washed and, how to grind it to get the optimal drip and why you use different methods for, there's drip versus, so I use the Bialetti pot, which I know people cringe at that are coffee snobs. Anyways, but we had this great conversation. I felt like we connected more on that level and there's some great projects where we connected more. And so while these things in my mind at the very beginning were like, they're so inconvenient. I think a lot of people view them as inconveniences of having to spend all this extra time outside of work with your colleagues. They were definitely beneficial for me in the sense that it created community and like somewhere where it was like, we could disagree safely. I never felt like if I stood up and said like, you're completely wrong and let me lay exactly out why you're wrong and like bullet pointed everything out, my boss would have never been mad. My colleagues would have never been mad. If anything, they're just going to argue back and say, Dimitri, you're completely wrong. You know nothing what you're talking about. So let me show you. And we had good times, but it's like we got so much more done because it was more of a cohesive unit. And so that I think in itself was a good benefit, even though it seemed inconvenient. The lesson is basically, while it can be inconvenient for you, it definitely pays off both on a personal level and on a professional level here. And then the final story here. So let's go into the final story here. The final story has to do with just challenges at work and how managers handle these from a personal incident story here. So I had a death in the family. So very specific to myself inside my very closest ring of family possible. And I also had a birth in the family, all within one manager here. And she did a great job, I think, at both scenarios for the most part here, where it was like when I had the death and the incident, it was like my boss was like, just take time off. Like right now, take time off, go. Like you need to start working and processing through these things. You need to handle this stuff. And as soon as she said that and I explained it, like I was just gone. So I was out for a couple days before I reported back and was like, hey, okay, this is what's really going on. These are the issues I'm having. And yes, I know HRs worldwide are cringing on like, well, there's processes and procedures and you got to fill out paperwork. Let me tell you, the processes and procedures for filling out leave is the most ridiculous waste of time I've ever seen. So I've had both the bereavement leave I had to take, which I got a fair amount of time off for that. And then the birth of my daughter, which I got off, I think 6 weeks for that. The amount of paperwork and the amount of headaches you have to do for these HR organizations is just complete crap. And it makes it more stressful. Like you already have all this stress for these situations here, which is why you're getting time off. And then you spend a good portion of your time off dealing with the nonsense here. So companies, if you would like to be great to your employees, just get rid of these processes or don't use crappy companies like we had to do because it was stressful and a pain in the backside. But that's not the lesson here. The lesson is the manager, though, she took great flexibility in just like making things happen and trying to clear schedules for me and just being like, your family's the most important piece here. Just go take care of what you need to go take care of. Follow up with me when you get a chance. We'll figure out what's going on. We can figure out the HR paperwork or whatnot. And I think being more understanding is a great benefit of this. The two lessons, though, from this is that, providing flexibility and basically reduces your stress and also looking at your workload. So my manager was also very in tune to how much work I had on my plate. And so we even had a discussion on, this is what's going on in your work schedule. This is what you're working on now. Do you need me to move this to somebody else? Or do you need me to cut this piece out or that piece out? Or like, what do you need to do to make sure that you're not worried about this? Like we have deadlines. We get that. We're moving things around. People can just basically deal with it. But also if we need to kind of take things off your plate, she was more than happy to do that. Now, I'm not the most, normal person, I guess. During the death scenario, I ended up taking on I wanted to stay extremely busy because I didn't want to be thinking about some of the issues that were going on at the time and the stress that was going on with it. So I requested to continue to keep my workload up and to continue to work. So she tried to convince me otherwise, but she agreed to it and my workload stayed the same. And then of course she said, if you need to drop at any point, like you get partway through this, just say something and we'll just reshuffle. So that was a great benefit here, having that flexibility, having that understanding above and beyond the dumb HR policies, which are just nonsensical in general. That's, I think, a great lesson as a manager of sometimes you're going to have to create flexibility and be understanding on the employee level that they're actual people and humans. If you had the first story about dinners and team building and all that, this is a lot easier to do and you can kind of relate with your employees a little better because you know them. And then the second takeaway, the second lesson here, which is kind of a failure not on a manager or a benefit of a manager, but kind of a failure on my part. Take off all of your time at once. So, oh man. So I had the birth of my daughter and you get 6 weeks paternity leave where I was at. So I could take off 6 weeks at a time. I was jazzed about it and excited. And then my daughter is getting closer and closer and closer. And I remember I think it was the day or the next day or whatever, waiting, maybe it was the day of, we're waiting at the hospital. And even a colleague called up and he's like, I got this question about this model. And we're talking stats on the phone. And I remember thinking why am I doing work when I'm at the hospital? But yeah, I know, no one's going to know the answer to this. So yeah, this is the answer to this. And then I remember then having her and then, of course, if you haven't had a child, it's complete chaos and busyness going on for a couple of days around it. And there's you're dead tired and you're dragging and as the husband, you don't even have to do any of the physical, process here, but you're tired and you're trying to help and you're sleep deprived. And it's a whole function of again, going back to that original statement, just being managers are great. They can just give you flexibility. And it's everyone's just gone and you're just focused on life. But then I started thinking okay, I have 6 weeks. I have to take them in full 1 week increments. So I'm going to take a week here so I can really help my wife. We can lay things out like the first week or two, and then taking off like the first week of like every month, thinking in my head, so I overthink these things, thinking in my head, like I'm going to help my team out at work because I don't want to have to drop all these projects and drop the ball here and then try to figure out how to reshuffle things. I'm going to keep up with it, and I'm going to do a week here and a week there, which it could have worked, but it didn't work. And that was a failure, probably more on my part. And so the lesson here, though, is like, if I would have just taken all 6 weeks together, I think I would have just felt a lot better on the projects at work. I would have got a lot more time at home. I would have been more focused at home. I probably could have been more efficient at home and dialed things in and figured things out before I actually had to go back to work. Where when you're going to a week on and then 3-4 weeks off and then a week back on PTO and then, off again and back and forth. And then again, this was even more stressful because every time I took a block of time, I'd have to call this dumb company up to do all the paperwork for the HR and say, yes, this is the birth, and I have to provide the same documents for the 15th freaking time, and it's a headache. But just take all of them at once. It will be far better for your mental health. Companies will live. They'll live without you. I mean, it's the same as if you quit and were just gone. They're not going to have anyone there to do it. But those are kind of the stories and takeaways here that I have learned, the positive examples that managers have had on me throughout my career here, things to do, things to watch for. And again, looking at these lessons, I try to think back through them when I've managed employees, when I've hired people, or when like things have gone wrong, not jumping to like, that was your fault, this was screwed up. It's trying to really think things through and think about, okay, how do we go about this strategically? Also trying not to like, break people's spirits and like trying to build relationships with people on a more meaningful level. Many firms I've gone to, I've seen there's these really crappy hierarchies where it's like, I'm above you or I'm your boss, and so I'm just not going to build a relationship with you. And then it makes things far more difficult. So anyways, those are my takeaways. Those are my lessons. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And as always, until next time.